Hi and bye, everyone. We're going to drop out of this experience right here. And welcome to all of you who are joining us here. We were just at a wonderful event hosted by the XR Industry Spotlight by Metaverse Workshop. I want to thank all of you who were able to join us there. And we're going to be discussing today GPT-4 and some of the advances in terms of writing tools and Promptcraft tools for your specific creative work when it comes to coding, writing and development, story development, and all of these topics. So obviously there has been a lot of news to talk about in this space, and we're going to try and get through as much of it pretty quickly. But thanks for those of you who were able to join that XR Spotlight. We're going to start talking about both ChatGPT, and I'm going to bring in a stream window here. And we're going to also talk about some of the competition in terms of the Promptcraft writing tools. So these are all tools that are creating bodies of text based on text. What I'm looking at right here is the website from Anthropic. Anthropic has a product called Claude. Claude is one of the main competitors to OpenAI and ChatGPT. So I wanted to start with this conversation about AI safety and risk because there is a lot to unpack here, and we're going to look at sort of how different groups are approaching these problems and how some of these teams may be more human-centered or maybe taking a more measured approach. In this case, Anthropic is saying our motto has been show, not tell, and so they are releasing a steady stream of safety-oriented research. Now, that is not necessarily how all of these companies have been approaching the space. So I wanted to give you some background. Obviously, we know that number one, there are a number of challenges in this space. All of them are going to be highlighted over and over again as we discuss this today. We know that AI is going to have a huge impact. We don't know how to train systems to robustly behave well. And this is an ongoing challenge throughout all conversations about AI, and especially anything that starts to go into AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. When we start to talk about those sorts of not just large language models like a ChatGPT-4, but something that is broader and more all-encompassing, we do not know how to train these systems to behave well yet. And so while we are very optimistic, and I would say many of these teams tend to be researchers who are realists, but also tend to be optimistic about the process of developing research that is empirically driven, but that is also relatively transparent. Now, this isn't what was necessarily happening across the board. Many of these teams worked very privately until recently. And so obviously Anthropic has a product, as we described, it's specifically called Claude. They have left this in a private beta, so you can apply to consider whether that's going to work for you. There are some tone choices and API choices that this tool specifically gives. If that's what you're looking for, that might be one way to get around your challenges. So we're going to talk through a couple of the other solutions out there today. And those of you who have been here for these sessions before know that we've discussed some of the generative tools in video. For example, we went and discussed Augie. We went and talked about the teams that work on game asset creation, right? So that is things like Simulacra, which is what you see here in terms of a space where you can do image generation together with other people. Or Scenario, which is what you see here, which is creating these animated cat gems and then working with them in game worlds, for example, right? So we've explored these topics in the past, and we've explored a little bit in the book as well, in the Promptcraft guidebook, about how to do the writing of prompts. And that includes things like developing skyboxes. We haven't so much talked about in these conversations what it looks like to imagine whole worlds and then to develop that language so that you are then able to prompt on it. So no matter what you're creating, whether it's an XR environment or a storybook, a world, a comic, an album, anything. Now, when we're talking about writing tools, there are many choices that you get to make along the way. So we're going to go through a handful of those here. I'm going to start with the tools over at Canva, because Canva, as an existing tool set that you can go and use today, also has what they call Magic Write, and they have a text-to-image tool that we've reviewed in the book as well. So Magic Write is a very simple writing tool. It says use 5 or more words to describe what you want to write. So write an outline for an article on prompt writing and Promptcraft with generative tools. And so we're going to see this create a snippet, in this case, an outline. If I had given it a different descriptor, it might have created a paragraph or something with a different constraint to it. But what we just saw is something similar to what you would get out of a tool like GPT-4 Now, that is, as it says, generated with AI using Canva Magic Write. This technology is new and improving. Please check the accuracy before sharing. So these are important notes with any of these tools. Don't assume that it is correct, right? Some of this information may be either grammatically incorrect or factually incorrect. And so you need to think about whether that's an appropriate use of the technology. But that's what Canva looks like inside. So we're going to switch between this and a few other tools very quickly here. And I am going to, let's see, which one do I show you next? Because there has been a rather boom in this space. And we're going to look at a couple of different sort of video clips along the way. And so let me go ahead and bring up this video right here. Oh, see now, why did it want to do that? Terrible screen sharing on my behalf. I am so sorry, everyone. Let's try that again. What we're going to do is show you a video that is specific to how Google is thinking about these tools inside of workspaces. So if you are a Google Docs user, for example, or if you use any of the suite of Google tools, this is what they are currently planning for. And we're going to talk over this a little bit. But you can see its autocomplete has now been sort of enhanced in a different way. So Google has their own internal team working on these tools. These are not yet out in public use. But you can see it is doing something similar to what we just saw with the Magic Write in Canva. And in this case, it's going to help you sort of swap out those snippets of content. So it can do sort of slides and campaign design. Some of these things you may find are also used already in Canva. And in the competitor over at Microsoft, they will be available as well. So integration with your email, for those of you who are Gmail users, that's something you may or may not want. Same with your campaign design in terms of your content management and your mailing lists and all of those sorts of things. Obviously, these could be productivity tools that might be useful for you, or they might be something that creates more security or risk challenge as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, but that's a brief look at Google and how they are approaching some of these challenges. So let's take a look next. We're going to jump over. I wanted you to see just sort of the sample of different tools that are out there. And obviously there are a lot of now text to writing and then speech and text. There are a number of different tools that are being developed outside of the big sort of companies, outside of Google, Microsoft. Meta has their own language model as well. So if you're looking at how this might include things like language choices or developing solutions, this is Neural Space AI. They've been working towards specifically accuracy in language deployment. And so if you're working between borders in Asia and in Africa and the Middle East as well, this might be a tool that might be more appropriate for you versus something like ChatGPT. So there are so many tools out there. It can be quite challenging to keep track of them. And we are going to talk a little bit about some of the technical side of this. But I wanted to also dive into something that is a bit fun while we have each other here. So I'm going to share with you how researchers are thinking about the creative side of this work. So we are looking at the WordCraft Writers Workshop, and this is specifically research on language models, for example, Google's Lambda, and how that creates the beginnings of story, right? So we're looking at we've talked a little bit about Promptcraft and language, developing language in order to get the generative outcome you're looking for. This is looking more directly at WordCraft as a writing practice. And this is developed by the researchers at Google Pair for writing stories with AI. Now, this is very early stage. There are obviously other companies and different types of tools that are approaching this problem in different ways, whether that's including, collaborative work or things like audio, video, avatars, and other things as well. But in this case, WordCraft is a Google research, and you're seeing the web application, right? So this is some of what we're seeing in terms of being able to auto-complete for story writing in terms of integrations with the Google Workshop. So if you're a Google user, if you're thinking about Docs and all of the Google suite of workspace and how it might be playing into your workflow, this is an interesting body of research, especially if you're a writer, if you're thinking about how WordCraft fits into all of these things in your own workflow. So yes, it is research, but yes, there is some fun to it too. I don't want people to get too worried or wound up about the research aspect of it being inaccessible, because as we are seeing more and more research published, it becomes more accessible for the general public to see what's happening. And whether we're talking about something like Google Workspace or whether we're talking about GPT-4, when published research is shared, that gives opportunity to really begin to have a conversation and a dialogue about what's appropriate. So this is the GPT-4 technical report. I find that this is pretty interesting, and it has some capabilities and limitations. This is an understanding of those benchmarks, and you may have seen some of this in terms of GPT-4 scoring in the 90th percentile on a number of big tests like the bar. And this is how it compares to previous models like GPT 3.5, which I've previously sort of compared to a college freshman level. If you're thinking about the skill of a writer, GPT 3.5 or the sort of open GPT that's out there right now on the OpenAI website is available for everyone to use, but it is going to write at a sort of college freshman, college sophomore level. It's not going to be great at comedy. as well as certain types of inferences and context, right? So there are certain ways in which this type of intelligence is developing very quickly to make better connections and then to be able to answer more challenging questions, more complex questions. So that's where you see growth in ability to manage in science and physics as well as in legal and in the bar. So this is what those results look like, and you can see where it's still struggling. There are ways in which GPT-4 is not going to be great. And so understanding what each model, for example, this specific set of tools, GPT-4, is decidedly better at writing both code and potentially at addressing light language for legal. And that's legal documentation, not necessarily serving as your lawyer, but helping with the documentation necessary in order to deal with legal filings. So, is it appropriate for all use cases? No. Is it appropriate for all language cases? Probably not. Does it have a pretty good language set in most of these? Yes. So these are where understanding what is useful or what is very interesting in the demos for GPT-4, and there's some video that we can share on that. What's interesting about those videos is that it can find what is funny in a way that previous language models, because they could not necessarily translate an image and then see what wasn't working, right? What doesn't make sense here? So what is funny about this image? Describe it panel by panel. This is something that previous language models were not able to do. Not just making the inferences, but even understanding what is funny is something that ChatGPT 3.5 was not necessarily good at. So there's a couple of leaps that are being made here. It's image. It's being able to recognize what's in an image and then contextualize it, and also understand what is funny about it, what is in that visual input that might be useful for the specific output that you're seeking, right? So if you're asking what is funny about an image, it might surprise you, but it is less likely to surprise you than a previous language model would have been. So how does that impact your work today and what you might be creating in your own flow? Well, there's a lot of ways potentially that you might be trying to use these tools in your own work. We could certainly explore a little bit of what that looks like today, but I feel like it might be more useful for you to look at sort of where the tools are going. And then we're going to talk about specific use cases in future streams as well. So let me just go ahead and share to a different screen. Right. Not that one either. Let's find the screen I'm looking for. Sorry, this is what happens when we've got too many screens to share. So we've talked a little bit about Canva, and we've talked a little bit about GPT by OpenAI. Now, GPT-4 is been developed in partnership in the sense that Microsoft has a stake in OpenAI, and they will be including it in the Microsoft Office. You'll already see aspects of that included in Bing, although Bing is differently coded in order to deliver a more sort of general audience consumer-friendly experience, not necessarily a full service, what we saw with GPT-4 in being able to do, for example, code in a wider variety of code bases, or deal with more complex tasks like what we just saw in images. All of those tools will be coming to the search engine and to the browser. They are already available in Bing. We are going to see them more and more in Google as well. And so Google is currently sorting out how they are going to be developing API. Specifically, they are introducing the Palm API, and that is how you can build on top of their language models. And so they have an intuitive tool here, what they call Maker Suite. And so this is where you can go and begin to develop those tools and figure out how they might work with your existing tools or workflows. So if you're thinking about trying to bring these into your existing platform, there's a couple of different ways that might work. It could be through App Builder, through Vertex. They have a couple of different partnership programs. And then obviously, if you're a Google Docs or Workspace user, you might be able to just go ahead and test that out now. Those set of features are going to be opening up in the next few weeks. So if you're a tester or if you subscribe to Google Workspace, you probably will have first access to that. Some of you already do, I believe. For example, Reid Hoffman just released his book that was published using GPT-4. We are obviously seeing books that are now being published using these tools. In my book, in Promptcraft, I specifically go through not just these tools, but sort of where the language is going for this space. So if you're trying to get a handle on the sort of language choices and how that is going to shift your collaborative space, the book is out in version 1 now. There are going to be additional pages in version 2 that will be released later on this spring. And as we're testing GPT-4 and other tools, for example, from Google, those will inform the other pages that are being added to the book. So I just wanted to let you know that while tools like Palm API and MakerSuite are just now being released, you can see that this was yesterday's news. Everyone is trying to beat each other to the punch right now in terms of the news cycles. So we're seeing Google, Microsoft, Meta, and many other companies all sort of rushing to say, hey, we've got our new tools and they're available for you now. Here's what you can do with them. So if you're trying to figure out how to work with the Palm API, Google's tools are all exactly on their blog, but you're going to be looking for MakerSuite specifically, and for the Palm API if you are a developer or a builder who is working in this space. So if you have other questions, if you're trying to figure out how these tools might be fitting into your workflow specifically, I want you to please go ahead and reach out. There's obviously a lot to unpack there, and feel free to go ahead and just share with me where you're at or where you're struggling. We're going to look at one more document while we have each other here, and I'm just going to share with you very quickly what is an emerging new approach to classification of AI. Now, this was released yesterday as well from Chris Saad and Jeremiah Allwing, I believe, with others who are contributing. So you'll please reach out to them if you have questions about this framework, but you can see that there are 8 different axes by which that intelligence is evaluated, going from 1 to 5, and looking at different types of intelligence, for example, mathematical intelligence versus kinesthetic or musical or spatial. So here we go. Ben Parr, Jeremiah Allwing, and Chris Saad. Chris is the publisher, and you can find this at his website, which is AI Framework. So based on a theory of multiple intelligences. I just want to encourage you to go ahead and take your own time with this, but this is what those levels correspond to in each of those classification frameworks, right? So what is a level 5 mathematical intelligence able to do, right? It is preemptively generating and explaining superhuman mathematical models that move the field of mathematics forward, right? So right now, with many of these new tools, we are seeing complex multimodal prompts, right? We are able to read an image as well as text. Soon we'll be, receiving that via voice, and all of those multimodal inputs can deliver a multimodal output, right? So in some of these categories, we're looking at a level 2 or a level 3 intelligence. In linguistic verbal, for example, it's not doing these things unprompted. It is not context aware yet, but it is, when prompted, able to deliver information. So if you're looking at, for example, where is that intelligence able to meet modern masters in music, for example, it's certainly able to meet them here at this sort of level 2 stage, and some at level 3, right? So I'm working on a lyrics project right now. This is where we're testing a wide variety of language models specific to less on composition, more on lyrics formation and thinking about, the necessary mix of language, meter, rhyme, inspiration, and all of the things that come with creative work combined with the musical process, right? So not replacing musicians in this space, but also augmenting the capacity of a band to, for example, build lyrics that rhyme. Whatever that might look like for you, with each of these indicators, and we're talking about 8 different ways of thinking about intelligence. So in the body kinesthetic space, we are seeing, for example, facial and body cams able to notice our gait in an XR experience. And so being able to have a traversal of a world based on natural language prompts is close, but maybe not there yet. Maybe we're at a level 2 in some worlds and maybe level 1 in others, right? So body kinesthetic is probably where there is less intelligence outside of something like robotics or an embodied computing system. But in some of these other systems, we might have a much stronger intelligence, right? And I thought this was fascinating in terms of existential, right? Able to consider and provide rudimentary reactions to existential topics when prompted. GPT-4 has proven itself to be able to do this, able to consider and provide rudimentary reactions to existential topics. Is it deriving meaning from the context or the circumstances? Not quite yet, but will it? Likely, right? So that is where going from a level 3 to a level 4, going from being able to infer from the prompt or from the information given to being able to intuit and just know based on all of the sensory input available what that information might be. So I want you to think about how each of these different types of intelligence sort of currently fit into what you're working on. Obviously, there's different highlights here for where different intelligences are well developed, right? So the visual spatial we've seen, for example, with image creation and image to image, but also in what we've seen with GPT-4, being able to read an image and see what's funny about it, being able to denoise an image and improve it so that if it's going into a film, it looks the best it can look like. So these frameworks, I think, are very useful if you're thinking about how all of these tools come together to inform a different way of thinking about intelligence itself. Obviously, a human intelligence is very different. We are a combination of all this and more. There are ways in which humans can think and be in the world that we do not even have language for yet. So when you're thinking about intuition, for example, or everything that would be called extrasensory perception, all of those things are also intelligences that not just don't have a code base yet or don't have a language model. We don't even understand how they work yet. So if you're thinking about the future of AI and AGI and how your work may be informed by all of this, I want you to think about what makes us uniquely human. And there are many things about the human experience that aren't necessarily going to be coded over to a tool set. So use your tools wisely for what they're good for, right? Use your tools to ideate together, right? Think about the ways in which you can be creative together. So you can be silly together or playful. You can design a new world or try to make a new experience together, right? So you have so many different options when you're thinking about these so that you don't have to get stuck in a rut. You can be broad and expansive in your thinking. So whatever it is that you're working on and whatever type of intelligence model you're trying to think through, how it informs whether you're working on a big creative work or maybe just working on your own, I hope you'll reach out. The Promptcraft guidebook is available, and I hope you will definitely let me know if you need help with any of these generative tools. I will be continuing the release study of things like GPT-4. So if you have specific questions on GPT-4 that you want us to test, in the Realitycraft group, which you are welcome to join, we do that pretty regularly. So Realitycraft is a group. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook. If you're a subscriber, you're already in there. And if you are not a subscriber, you can go to evo.ist to jump in on that. If you would like to just get started, the ebook is free on Kindle right now, and there is that link. And I hope that you will go ahead and check that out, along with some of the tools that we described today if you are exploring. So whatever it is, I hope that you will think broadly about how these tools might inform your process, but think carefully about how to apply them, especially when you're working out in public. If you have any questions, or if you need help for a future event, a consultation, a workshop, or any sort of concept development project, please reach out. I'm happy to support you. And wherever you are in the world today, I hope you are going to have a beautiful day out there creating those wonderful worlds together.